So I'm going to talk about some new features that we have that have come up since the videos that I've done before. Most of these are new things that we can do with objects that we had before. Some of them are just new features and updates to what we used to have already. I think I covered some of them in a video about an update that we had, but I'm not sure that I've covered everything, so I'm just going to go over some of the special items and some of the cool key things that we can do with them, as well as some of the settings that we've gotten. So in the environment, whatever, world tab, we now have procedural vegetation. If you click this, it will, when the map gets played, just generate little tiny rocks and vegetation, little plants and rocks all across the terraformable terrain layer. This is a layer that only exists in the Zephyr, lava, snow, and desert biomes. If you try to create your map in space, you don't get this layer, so there isn't a vegetation option for space. We now have, in addition to procedural shaping, we have the procedural paint. What that does is it will actually, if we click it, it'll make the paint fill in areas. Like if you look over around this layer, or around this rock here, it will add rock around rocks where it can associates with the where rock associates with the terrain layer. It'll add rock, and it'll sort of blend water as well. But you can see sort of where this comes to the, it creates this little rock layer through here. So it actually uses some logic to add some painting, and then it just sort of procedurally paints and blends the rest. On the environment tab, we now can choose our fog color and our light color, and we also have environmental effects. Environmental effects, really awesome. It gives us zones with rain and zones with snow. It gives us blowing sand and sound effects. The sound effects are really, really loud, so if you don't like that, don't use it. It will mess with people's ability to communicate, and a lot of people don't like that. So turning that on is awesome, but it is it does have an effect. I think that cuts it for that area there. We received the flashlight enabled. I think I've covered advanced structures before, but if you've ever wondered, that is how you turn on the ability to use vehicles in PvE maps. We now have power-ups, and so power-up limitations can be set. You can now have the dropped boxes. That's these, right? Your yellow balls, spawn balls. You can now have those spawned on the ground, and you can select what kind of rewards come out of those, which gives you the ability to, say, completely eliminate any chance of getting a mech on the map, or getting additional weapons, or things like that. You can now set a warp gate health, which certainly could play into a map that has high damage enemies on it, or it also works very well for adjusting, say, a destroy the base health map. If you're concerned about the health being too low on a destroy the base PvP map. And then, yeah, clearing bugs on the end of the stage for survival is a fantastic new addition for that. But let's go into some really cool features that we have added since I did this special assets video. If you don't remember, non-walkable will carve the nav mesh so that when the nav mesh is generated, this area won't get nav mesh and people won't be able to walk there. If they jump into that space, it will it'll fall, or they'll get stuck on it if the area has colliders. Invisible platform will create nav mesh, so people will be able to walk up this area, but they won't be able to land on it. It won't have colliders, but it'll have walkable nav mesh, so you'll be able to walk up it. Or if something spawns on it, like I've created out here, something can be spawned on this nav mesh and then walk on it, but if somebody tries to jump onto it, it won't work. The invisible wall creates colliders, so you've got non-walkable that destroys nav mesh, that disallows nav mesh, the invisible platform which creates nav mesh, and then you've got the invisible wall which creates colliders. So if you actually stack invisible wall and invisible walkway in the exact same space, you can get a landable platform, which is pretty cool because there are assets like clouds that you cannot land on. So if we want to, we could create a cloud that you could land on. If you wanted to jump from cloud to cloud on a map, like I don't know, make something like Mario, that could be cool. The kill volume, we got this. We actually had this before, but it killed everything and it carved the nav mesh, so players could walk into it and die, but the bugs would not walk into it. If you turn on the damage over time, it will no longer carve the nav mesh, and the bugs will walk through it if that's their only path, and they'll take damage when they do. Players, when they walk into it, will also take damage. I think you take 10 damage when you first walk into it, and then another 10 damage after 5 seconds or something. Maybe I'm not sure exactly what the numbers there are, but if you wanted to, I've done this on some of my maps, you could stack them next to each other, and then the player takes 10 damage, 10 damage, 10 damage, 10 damage as they try to go through it. So do the bugs. What's very interesting about this, though, is if you stack them, say, like this, you'll notice that the player who goes to walk through it, I have this set a little high, but the player who goes to walk through it takes damage as they walk through, but the bugs walk under it without taking damage because their collider that they're taking damage based on is only this tall, whereas the player is this tall. The player into the kill mesh and they take damage. The bug, walks under the nav mesh and they don't take damage, or under the kill mesh and they don't take damage. Both the bug and the player walk on this terrain. It's not like you can take an object and place it there and the bugs will go under it but the player won't. Because the object is there, it will not allow nav mesh to be created in this space. It has to have a certain height that's tall enough for the player to walk through in order for the nav mesh to get generated underneath. But so long as that nav mesh is getting generated there, which, because these are damage over time volumes, it does get generated, the player can walk through and take damage and the bug will not. Same is true of these new laser traps that we got. If you have a laser trap that's set up high, the laser trap will turn on and off based on this activation time. You could set it to 0 to leave it on. That's generally what I like to do unless I'm really trying to time something out, because I don't like that zapping on and off sound effect. But yeah, you can set that at a certain height. Now, the player could get down really low on the ground and, you know, manually lower themselves down and duck under, which is certainly something that you can add as a obstacle feature. It's a lot harder to duck down and play that way, especially when you're trying to fight, you know, reload your weapons and stuff. And a lot of people who, you know, play seated don't have that option anyway because there's no crouch button. But that's just something to think about, is that the way that your head takes damage doesn't get affected, or doesn't. Not all bugs are going to get affected that way if they try to crawl under something in that way. So covered laser traps, covered kill mesh. We also got this only damages players. Now, although it looks like that, if you let go and reconnect, the damaged over time drops off and only damaged players turns on. Hopefully someday we get an only damages bugs. Maybe that'll come soon, but currently only damages players also doesn't carve the nav mesh. So if you put that there and the player walks into it, they die, but the bugs can come through it. So this allows you to create a space that the bugs cannot go through, but the player can. It's a little frustrating because it's not super easy to make this obvious. The player will die if they go through that space, but if you are, say, you know, making a pool of acid or something, and you want to make it clear that, you know, the bugs can come across it, but you don't want the player to be able to, right? You can do it this way with these only damages players kill volumes, and it will kill the player if they try to cross it, but it won't kill the bugs. Neat way to cause players to go this direct, you know, go one way versus another. We just recently got these. These are addable turrets from the that always go to the bug side, and you place these out there. One of the really interesting things that they gave to us about these SAM turrets is that they will actually kill the player in tactical view. So if you want to, you could place a bunch of these out in a way that will take out the players that are trying to explore your map in tac view. But double-edged sword is that, you know, then are putting some turrets out that could affect how the map plays as well. So SAMs and turrets, these will attack the player when they're in tac view, and you also they're going to attack the players and the player units and stuff as well. So you can sort of give your, they're kind of like these standalone sentinels, but the sentinels don't attack the tac view player. So there's that. Destroyable wall. All right, so we're getting into something that is really cool that they've given to us. The destroyable wall and the portal were just added, and they are fantastic, phenomenal assets for changing the way the bugs interact with the map, and also changing the way that the player can interact with the map. By creating two, here's the important thing, the group ID. We've mentioned group IDs before when we were talking about occlusion volumes, That's definitely an more advanced thing. These are an advanced tool as well. So when you add 2 portals, and they share a group ID, right? You can make this group ID 101, right? So long as one of them says 101 and the other one says 101, right? 101 and 101. Whenever a replaceable enemy, a movable enemy, or player, whenever a player enters into this space, and I'm going to go ahead and illustrate the size of that space using, let's find a cylinder. Basic shape cylinder. You want so as soon as somebody enters this space here, right? As soon as they go into there, they're going to be teleported over here. And likewise, as soon as they enter over here, they're going to be teleported over here. You can use this on your map to cause the player to be able to reposition themselves across the map. It's important that how you use that is somewhat clear for the players that are going to be entering this, right? You want them to understand what they're doing, so maybe you label it, or maybe that's just the way that they need to go, and they will find it based on how the map is laid out. But you can have a lot of these paired teleporters on your map. What gets confusing is the way that the bugs will path. The bugs are always going to path towards generally one of 2 points. They're either going to come for the player or they're going to come for the warp gate, right? So generally they only go for the player in survival or conquer, and they only go for the warp gate, and they will go for the warp gate and everything except conquer, or except survival, because there's no warp gate in survival. And I guess they also will path towards the miner in various protect modes, in the 2 different protect modes. But they're going to use the nav mesh and their programming to go the shortest route to get to that location from wherever they spawned. And the only adjustment to that is that every once in a while their route will get updated based on some kind of a logic, and that logic may be because if another bug is killed right in front of them, then they will try to repath in a different direction. Or sometimes in Conquer they will get an updated order to go attack somewhere else, like defend or reinforce or something like that. So, but they're gonna follow the nav mesh, the shortest path to whatever their target is. Why this is important is because if you put a teleporter in their nav mesh, then they are in that path, then they will go onto that teleporter and get teleported somewhere else, and at that point they're going to have to be given some, because they've been repositioned, they're going to have to get a new order for how their path is going to change to get to the base. And typically that happens very, very quickly. They get teleported across and then they start on their new nav mesh to the base. But let's say you don't want to put the teleporter directly on that path, but you still want the bugs to use it. or you want it to seem like that's not directly their path, right? And for this example, I'm going to use the map that I just created a week or so ago, Omega, to explain how this works. So if you want them to take a different path, say you want them to come out over here, but you want them to enter in, I've got to use a good example. You want them to enter in up here, right? And you want it to seem like they're choosing to take that path. Well, that is where these invisible platforms come in handy. So let's take this and make it look like this, right? So they are going to choose to enter onto these platforms, or onto these platforms there, because they are that's the path that gets them, because they can't just walk down here. If they're spawned up here and they can get to this teleporter, they're going to see the nav mesh. The player doesn't see this. This is invisible, and unless the player walks onto this platform and starts walking this nav mesh, the player doesn't see this nav mesh, right? It's invisible to them. Even if they jump onto it, they will fall through. But the bugs, let's say the bugs spawn from a spawn ball over here, right? When they do, they're going to spawn from the spawn ball. They're going to go to this nav mesh because they're going to go to this portal because they're going to try and walk up this nav mesh and take that down here and then come to the base. To the player, it's going to look like the bugs are spawning up there and going directly to the portal, and then getting teleported down here to this nav mesh and then running to the base. Likewise, if the player was to jump across this canyon, the bugs would look at them, turn, and walk over here, step onto this portal, because they would want to. They would know that the only way that they can get over here is by going here, climbing up and over, right? But once they get here, they're going to end up taking the teleporter. They're going to be automatically teleported up here, at which point they're going to be chasing their player, right? So because this is a survival map. So you get that ability to build that in. Now, if these can be resized currently, I hope that doesn't go away. I enjoyed resizing them. I put it to half, which when I did that, I unfortunately found that it also halves the size that they can get teleported from. So if you make it too small, your player can walk on top of it, or your bugs can walk on top of it without actually getting teleported. So it's important to have that height. If you see, like, if you imagine your player walks on top of it and their legs walk through it, but their whatever hitbox, their capsule doesn't actually get picked up. So it's important to recognize that you can't just shrink it all the way down to a sliver and it still work. But you can adjust the size of these. So that's pretty cool. All right. Invisible or destroyable walls. This is a really cool new feature that we've got. If we take our wall out, right, and we add this wall here, the bugs can come by and they can kill this wall, and then that wall is no longer blocking them from getting through. But they're not going to be attracted to this wall to kill it. If you block their pathway, then they won't know to come to this wall to destroy it. Sort of like with these teleporters, the bugs don't know to go to the teleporter. They only know to follow the shortest path to get to their objective. And they will attack things that they encounter that they can attack along the way. So, if your bug's spawning over here and you have destroyable walls that block their path all along the way, but they can actually make it to the warp gate, then they will start to walk their path towards the warp gate, and instead of going all the way to the warp gate, they'll stop, attack this wall until the wall is destroyed along the way, right? And when the wall is destroyed, then suddenly their nav mesh opens up and they can go through here, and now every bug that comes along after that will also go through that way instead of this way. But if you for some reason think that it's okay to block the nav mesh entirely, you take this out as well and you block here and here, well then the bugs are not going to come this way. They're actually going to go straight across over here to where they can climb up, across, and down under, and they're never going to come destroy this wall. Does that make sense? They have to actually get close enough to be attracted to attacking the wall in order for it to make sense for them to actually kill that wall. And it's really cool that we have that ability now, because you can make a whole big maze of walls, or a whole network of a map, right, that does have these shortcuts, that does have these wall shortcuts or whatever, that the bugs will find and destroy so long as they are on the path that the bugs would take in order to get to their objective. And when that wall comes down, that changes the game, right? The player can choose to pay to rebuild the wall, but it definitely affects how the game plays. It changes how it works. So, one more note about these damage over time kill volumes. I love them. I think that they're fantastic. I recommend you use them in conjunction with something like a Steam asset to make it clear to your player that they are entering an area that is potentially harming them, like the environment is harming them. In the not everybody has this filter by biome option, but in the lava biome, you have the ability to make spaces with lava, right? And you may not want to use a bunch of Steam assets because they are transparent and they mess with things, but you may want this lava to be painful, so you might put damage over time volumes over that. There is already a kill mesh built into the lava plane asset, but there's not built into this jagged rock lava asset. So if you want that to be a kill mesh, if you want to use that to have lava flowing in an area, and you want people to take damage or die when they go over that, right? but you want the bugs to be able to walk down that lava flow. Just be aware, that you have those options. So, filter by biome, I've mentioned in another video. When you get the rank of Galaxy Mapmaker or whatever, that becomes available. Getting a map in the Galaxy, or whatever, having the diamond rated maps that get into the Galaxy, that's how you get that feature, but use it with caution, because when you start combining a bunch of assets together, particularly when you combine a bunch of assets from different packs, try to stick to 1 or 2 packs. Try not to use a lot of assets from a bunch of different biomes and a lot of assets from a bunch of different packs, because they use different materials. The more assets you use of different materials and stuff, the worse the frame rate will be when players are moving around and looking around in your map. And when the frame rate's bad, people get sick. So don't split too often, too much. I think that pretty much covers things. Definitely don't abuse this. They gave us recently the ability to add custom damage and health bonus, so we can do up to like 5,000, I think, hit point percent additional hit points, or really just almost insta kill everything, that kind of damage. And water assets now have the ignore collisions option, which is fantastic, because it used to be when you jumped on water, you would just start skiing. Now you can make a water plane that, while it will still collect bullets if you try to shoot through it, you can now jump into water and actually fall down to the ground and walk on it. So please do that on any maps that you have that put water over a plane that become tricky like that. I personally didn't use water in a lot of maps because it caused issues like that. Anyway, a couple maps that I did. I don't know if I'll add it because I don't want people walking in the water, but we'll see. Anyway, enjoy map making, and good luck out there, Guardians.